There are a lot of superficial presses on case, but they're not refuting the fact that there is a loss, and that's all we need to prove the resolution on exchange rates. My first response is that criteria takes out. This is completely irrelevant. We're still showing a loss. We're still showing a loss regardless of what other gains foreign investment proves. Next response, they're removing the word causing. They indicate that foreign investment is a detriment, not detrimental. In other words, it's a loss or damage, and not it's causing loss or damage. Next response, this moves causing as well, because it's a loss or damage and not a damage. Next response, they're not evaluating our scenario. Clearly, it's only of general foreign investment. It doesn't evaluate tax laws. Next response, induction self-correcting. This is Nisbet in 86. The modified default rule informs for the purpose of protecting good generalization from buffeting by what would otherwise be frequent predictive failures. Next response, please cross-apply the responses that are going to be on balanced argumentation on case. That's where I am now. Off the MIT card, he says general solution, and then we evaluate holistically. Please group his first response. First response, we reject advocacy when he described. Next response, please pull the CSO when subpoint indicates that description is the sole descriptive mechanism. Next response, we're not parametrizing, but no, he says we're not parametrizing, but we're not defining all detriments, right? Even though that we're holistic all foreign investment, we're not indicating that we have to prove all detriments. Next response, clear criteria contradicts their theory. We're indicating that all we have to show is one detriment and one loss. Next response, holistic and substantive, not evaluative terms in the resolution. Off his fourth response, he says this is a logical takeout. By criteria or preempts, this is irrelevant, right? We only have to show one detriment, not all detriments. Clearly, we are evaluating by a case-by-case scenario as far as the consequential applications. Off his fifth and sixth responses, he says they're burdened to AC can because it's preemption. My first response is tax laws clearly is the causality, and that's all we need for the loss. Next response, consequential analysis is specific, and therefore we're meeting the MIT card. Off the detrimental causes loss. He has a lot of argumentation about the disjunct. Off his first responses indicates this is a plural term. He says first response is plural. My first response is what does this mean? There's absolutely no analysis. Next response is linked off this analysis, and please don't let him blur about these responses without providing any analysis. Off his next, second, and third response, he says on balance is fine. My first response is pull definition of detriment equals causing loss or damage. Next, causality denies all affirmative versions to prove one loss or damage and not net loss or damage, which is what they're arguing. Next, descriptive nature disputes resolution requires studying the loss of damage and a wholesale subjective evaluation. Next, means that causing detriment equals causing a loss or damage. Negative interpretation requires trend to equal loss or damage. Next response, unique meaning necessitates affirmative need present only that foreign investment detrimental, not unreasonable. Next, means that detriment negative analysis argues that trend equals detriment, not detrimental. Next, on balance, relevant analysis and counter-analysis is one effect required, not presentation of effects and counter-effects. Next, pull the C2 sub-1 way on balance within affirmative scenario. Next, affirmative interpretation increases slash focus and intensive debate on case arms not target tangential and relevant counterwords. Next, negative equals no win situation either we're not topical we're outweighed by other effects like this exchange rates observation. Next response goes out increases education, signaling analytic discussion of tax law and damage not peripheral comment. Next response makes decision making possible, precludes an unavoidable dilemma between benefit and detriment and causality. Next response destroys pedagogical freedom, discourages innovative analysis simply because the majority of teams don't present, right? This is an innovative case. Next response resolution proposal denies that it's a passive description, not active advocacy is warranted by the resolution, and this is fed by the argument on case that we don't have disclosure now. Off his fourth response, he says the choices are not diametrically opposed. My first response is this is an oversimplification. It's not it's an oversimplification. They're categorizing districts as either mutually exclusive or mutually inclusive. Clearly, it can be just a distinction. Next response, this is clearly what our distinction is. It's a delineation, and it's not a mutual inclusion or exclusion. Next response, that their analysis clearly excludes this from consideration, and that's unfair, and that's inaccurate. Off his fifth response, this is a weak district. First response, they're not similar in nature, and that's the presumption of the card. Next response, loss is clearly distinct from damage. One is descriptive, one is normative. Next response, to that extent, he argues. One argues for observation, one argues for observation, passive observation, and the other one argues for active evaluation. In response to that extent, we can kick out of certain scenarios. Off the quantitative loss, he says quantitative loss, but this just proves normative versus descriptive delineation. He says a weak disjunct, but that's above. His eighth response is affirmative can't hack up, but clearly we can. If the normative observations, for example, on case, or the normative observation contention 2, we can still prove loss. It's not the response must weigh impacts. Wrong. Unbalance is bad because you're neglecting the affirmative warrant on B subpoint. His first two responses are must look at options and limit policy implications. No, criteria explicitly indicates the affirmative need only describe a loss and therefore not look at policy implications. Excuse me. Please pull the analysis on the first response, indicating that the sole descriptive mechanism in the resolution is description. Of the second response, they have three responses, indicates affirmative or burden, and you can never prove causality. My first response is clearly this is a horrible evidence. This assumes science and assumes scientific observation. Clearly this is debate. Next response, clearly all the preponderance of evidence on contention 1 is affirmative. They're not neglecting the cards, and they're really not pressing the cards well, indicating that there is tax loss. Next response, clearly regardless of any policy implications or intrinsic necessity you can make, we're still showing a causality 3 intermediate steps. Of the third response, it says definition of detriment. He says argue on definition of strong and weak, but this is all above, right? We're indicating that all we have to show is causality. We don't have to show that that there is net loss or damage, only that there is a loss or damage. Of the fourth response, it says not to resolution. My first response, clearly there is. One is descriptive, one is normative. Next response, to that extent, we're proving delineation between loss or damage. They're clearly losing the criterial debate. On C subpoint criteria. He says on balance is okay, but that's above. He cross applies the disjunctive analysis, but it's clearly, ours is clearly superior. His is oversimplification. His third response is pull the definition. He says pull the definition of nation. He says pull the definition of nation. That's what we're going to cover. He says a nation equals people. people and government as a nation. My first response is government is a necessary part of the nation, right? Next response, U.S. refers to the republic, which therefore presumes the nation, refers to the government. Next response, pull the macroeconomic detriments. This is on contention too. This assumes damage to the public. Next response, descriptive loss is met also because the tax burdens are shifted. This is a congressional record of March 6, 1990. Mr. President, person suspicious proved to be accurate. We're talking about $50 billion that U.S. taxpayers have to pay because foreign tax cheaters shifted the tax burden to our citizens. Down below, on the second subpoint on balance, he says no, not until we're not parameterizing, but clearly we're not parameterizing the detriments, and there's no burden to do so. We're clearly holistic as a foreign investment, but we're meeting the MIT card, and that we're evaluating case by case. On contention 1. His first response is not government, but that's above. His second response is net gain supporting the deficit. My first response is they're causing the gap in the first place, and that's the detriment. Next response, please, the last card indicates you're perpetuating the problem. Just because foreign investors quiesce it by financing doesn't mean that they're causing the problem in the first place. Next response, gain doesn't outweigh loss, and that's a criteria objection. His third response, foreign investment increases growth, increases growth, but this is completely irrelevant, right? We could be weighing on balance and determine that foreign investment is good, but that's not the affirmative verdict. We need only claim that foreign investment does cause a loss or damage. Whether that is outweighed by other benefits is irrelevant. His fifth response is foreign investment is a means of growth, but that clearly feeds my analysis about all we have to show is straight causality, right? There are other means to other consequences. His fifth response is about foreign investment needed to me, but that just feeds our argument that foreign investment is the cause of the gap in the first place. Off the second card, he says it's not a loss and only lack of gain, but we're clearly showing that it's a negative tax liability. Please pull the card. It indicates that they're lying because they're making income of $500 billion. Off the third card, he says that equals disclosure and make this entire case. My first response is we reject the advocated burden. Next response, there's no reason why we have to prove advocacy. Next response criteria clearly takes out. All it shows is that we have to show a description of the case arts. Next response clearly that feeds the argument, right? Because we don't have disclosure, that proves that there's no tax loss. That's not a neglection. That's not that doesn't preclude it for warrant. Just proves it. Off the fourth response is both corporate and individual. He says we don't know. My first response is clearly the preponderance of evidence, especially down below, indicates that we're losing. Next response is simply indicates that we're holistic as far as the foreign investment goes. Next response, it doesn't deny case by case. We're indicating that tax loss, and they're not refuting it, right? If anyone, it's not that. If anyone, it's a negative. It's not meaning the MIT card. On the next three cards, he says follow all laws, and they're all subject to government. My first response is clearly these cards are terrible. They're not assuming the tax laws. They're just saying that they're subject to the laws. Next response, it doesn't say they obey the laws, just that they're subject to the laws, but we're clearly indicating that this is blatant disobedience. His third response is only lack of gain. Please pull the third response, indicates that we're being ripped off because they're cooking books. And the first and the congressional record in March 1990 indicates that there's a loss of $1 billion a year. They're not debating. Off the last card, he says first response only lack of gain equals gain for Japan and the U.S., etc. But this is taken out, right? On balance, considerations are completely irrelevant. They've got to win criteria in order to make any of this irrelevant at all. As long as we show one loss or damage, we're winning the round. Off the bottom two cards, please pull the third to the last card. Indicates the government is losing up to $12 billion a year. Off the last two cards, please pull the $50 billion card. He says Japanese provide taxes. First response, don't deny evasion. Next response, clearly evidence doesn't assume or scenario. Next response, please pull the congressional record in March 1990 card. Indicates $50 billion loss. Nowhere are they evidencing their responses, right? We're indicating point blank that they're evading taxes, leading to a $50 billion loss a year. There are no responses, and certainly not specific responses. And second response is going $43 trillion a year. This is a horrible card. It says how many total assets there are. It has nothing to do with taxes. Clear affirmative round. Pull contention too.
Yeah. Okay. I need two things. First of all, the bunch you're doing on disjunctives, please. And then what was the other one?
Off disjunctives or off on balance?
Disjunctive, I think there were about 15 of them. Why do we only evaluate your scenarios? And why are we even in this room, for example?
Well, you're here to debate tax laws.
But you won't
Do foreign investors actually debate taxes?
Okay.
Is there tax laws?
Okay, that's the only thing we could ever talk about then.
Well, because we presented the round as the affirmative discussion, then you should
Okay,
oblige.
what did we decide the trend was this speech?
That the trend was?
Yeah.
Was a tendency or inclination toward increasing foreign investment.
Okay, what is that?
It's the tendency toward increasing foreign investment.
So the surge of foreign investment is probably the trend. Increasing foreign investment is what we're evaluating.
Right.
Okay, great. So, on this card, you accuse me of not evidencing any of my responses. You read one card in your 2AC that says taxpayers are making up for it all, huh?
Mm-hmm.
So we have no loss, do we?
Well, there's no real reason for me to read more cards in 2AC when the 1AC card analysis are undenied. You're reading cards that say foreign investment promotes growth. Big deal. That doesn't necessarily deny the fact that they're evading taxes. Who cares? Maybe foreign investment is on balance good. That's not the determination of the round. That's not the purpose for today's round.
So
the purpose is to determine whether they're causing a loss or damage.
If I lose $10 and find 50, have I achieved the loss?
Yeah, you've lost $10. You just explained it for us. You've lost $10. You've gained 50.
Okay. So there's nothing really we can do then.
Yes, you can debate tax laws. You could have researched tax laws. You could have researched the fact that taxes are bad.
Okay.
You could have said a lot of things.
Okay. Your card here that says consumers paying $50 billion to make up.
Mm-hmm.
Tax burden shifts.
Right.
Now, where's the net loss then? Now, the card I'm reading, the best card I see on your case says they're not paying $12 billion.
No, that's the first card. That says the next card says the more real. That says without including state taxes. Well, including state taxes is probably even more.
50%
Next card
higher.
says the most realistic expectation is $50 billion a year.
Okay, so, and consumers are making up $50 billion.
No, it says that the tax burden is shifted to taxpayers. Now, the evasion of those is a totally different debate round. Maybe we'll debate that in semis or next year if it's a different
Are they
topic.
evading them?
We don't know. The fact is that they're obligated to
But
pay.
this card says, can I see the card? It says
Yeah,
consumers are making it up, doesn't it?
No, it says that the tax burden is shifted to other taxpayers.
Okay, great. So there's unpaid taxes, so they shift the burden. Is that true? I mean, when there's unpaid taxes, the burden shifts.
They're right.
This doesn't seem like a very wise response to me if you're trying to prove loss. When you say consumers make it all up.
The fact that the burden is shifted doesn't indicate that the tax dollars are made up. That's your burden to prove, and I don't see any evidence.
But you say when they're not paying, the tax burden shifts, right? I mean, that's what
Right.
happened here. Now, let's say these people weren't paying. Wouldn't they probably shift it again?
If these people weren't paying,
Yeah, I mean, they did
shift
it just in your case. Why would they do it?
Now, I don't understand how this denies loss, right? In fact, it proves that. The fact that they have to keep shifting the tax burden means that they're losing money and they have to make up for it.
But they get the money.
Compensation implicitly assumes loss.
Times.